Bon dia, sóc en Marc, sóc de Mallorca, a Espanya, també bé, jo tinc 27 anys i estic aquí als Estats Units ara estudiant el doctorat. Well, hi, what I just said in Majorca, that's a dialect of Catalan, is that good morning, my name is Marc, I'm 27 years old and I'm from Majorca in Spain, and I'm studying my PhD right here, right now.
Well, thank you, Mark. One thing that you've said already is that you're from Spain, but you didn't speak to us in Spanish. You used Catalan. Why is that?
Yes, I spoke in Majorcan. That's one of the dialects of Catalan, and I also speak Spanish because I am Spanish, and that's where I learned also. However, I'm speaking one of the languages that's spoken in Spain. So a lot of people don't know that Spanish isn't the only language that is spoken in Spain. There are other languages also that are co-official with Spanish in the different territories.
And so, if you speak both Catalan and Spanish, how did you learn those two languages? Did you learn them both at home growing up?
Well, my case is pretty singular in a way, in the sense that I learned Catalan. I did learn Catalan at home, speaking with my dad. Then, in my case, my mother is from Scotland, so I learned English also at the household by speaking with my mom in English. And basically, my first contact with Spanish was probably the media, television, but also when I went to school, because I might get to this in a while, but I spoke Spanish, and the education system was exclusively in Spanish, especially in my first years.
And so how old were you when you went to school and you started learning Spanish?
Well, I was at school, and Spanish was around me. But when I was at school, probably age 4, most of my teachers at that time were Spanish speaking. Because I come from an area that's normally a tourist destination in the coast, in Majorca, that has a lot of immigration from the mainland, from Spanish-speaking parts of the mainland. Most of the people that were in the school with me were Spanish dominant, meaning that they didn't really speak much Catalan. And that's maybe the reason why I speak Spanish with my sister now, exclusively Spanish, never Catalan nor English, because we used to go to school, walk there together, come back, and at this very early age, this is the language that has stuck with us.
And so then you completed your whole education in Spanish?
Not really. There was a change. Basically, especially in my first years, it was all in Spanish, and this had been like this for a long time. I mean, in Spanish, but there's been some kind of revival or renaissance of Catalan, where there's been a lot of policies, kind of implementing Catalan, expanding Catalan, and right now, I remember perfectly well, I was in my 6th grade in primary school, and from one year to another, we started having classes exclusively in Catalan. So classes like history, like math, like sciences, started to be conducted in Catalan. So there was a shift with that. Right now in the university, also high schools, the majority are all conducted in Catalan. Spanish is still a it's a mandatory class you need to take, but right now there is this shift that is affecting the younger generations in Spain, and especially in the area where I come from.
And so then the community where you come from, was it because of their pushing Catalan? Did they want more Catalan to be used, or how did they feel about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, there is a divide right now in the Catalan society, basically in the mainland, in Barcelona, in Valencia. That's another area that also speaks a dialect of a different version of Catalan, and the islands where I come from. You need to go back to history, to kind of see where all this comes from. Catalan has been spoken for a very long time. I mean, basically, Spanish and Catalan are both Romance languages, same as French or Italian or Portuguese, and Romance languages, as you know, means that it comes directly from Latin. So basically, the first wave of Latin that came into the mainland, basically, reached Portugal, reached Spain. So that's why we see many similarities between those languages. On the other hand, there was a second wave also that encompassed eastern Spain, the mainland. That would be what now is Catalonia and Valencia, where they speak Catalan, also the islands. And that also coincided with France and Italy that also got that wave. So that's why there are many similarities between Catalan and French and Italian.
And so you've said that, we've talked about the relationship between all of these languages, but is Catalan really so different from Spanish? Is it much more than just a different accent or different dialect of Spanish? Should it really be considered as its own language?
It actually is quite different. Obviously, as a Romance languages, it could be as different as me listening to a Portuguese speaker or an Italian speaker. Yes, I'm going to catch some of their words. However, it is a different language. It's not just a dialect of Spanish, meaning that there's a lot of immigration from Latin America to Majorca, and these children have to face a different language, and that is a shock to them. But there are many examples of differences between Spanish and Catalan. For example, phonologically, we're going to find different sounds that exist in one language and are in the other. So, for instance, starting from something as basic as vowels, if you study Spanish, you will know that Spanish has 5 vowels. However, Catalan has 8 vowels. Still not as many as English, but has 8 vowels.
So then, a quick question. Would a Spanish speaker learning Catalan have more trouble than an English speaker learning Catalan because of the vowels?
Well, that's a good question. Now, we should consider that just looking at the basic vocalic systems of both languages, we would assume that English speakers would be more used to producing certain vowels that Spanish speakers have trouble perceiving and producing because they're not used to it.
That's really interesting. Could you talk to us some more about other similarities or differences between Spanish and Catalan?
Mm-hmm. Well, phonologically, I just mentioned the vowels. There's also like the sound j that is also a phoneme in Catalan, but not in Spanish. Also, there's the liquids. There are differences in the liquids. Basically, we have different kind of liquids. For instance, we have geminates also. So,
what's a geminate?
A geminate would be basically like if you have an L, you would have a long L. That would be an equivalent to 2 L's. Basically, that would be a straightforward explanation for a liquid, for a geminate. Sorry. So geminates are also common in Italian, quite common in Italian. So then, for instance, to say a student, you would say estudiante, but you could also say alumna. Now, if you realize, I'm not saying alumna, I'm saying alumna, so that's a long L. Also, talking about the L's in Catalan are different than the L's in Spanish. An example of an L in Spanish would be a L. If I want to do it with a Catalan accent, well, the Catalan L would be L. So you can see that difference, right?
Very interesting. So you've talked a lot about the sounds, but are there bigger differences, maybe between words?
Mm-hmm. There are many lexical differences. Obviously, we're talking about different languages, and because of there being no such thing as a Catalan monolingual, because as I've said before, Catalan speakers are Spanish citizens, are surrounded by Spanish in the media, in the streets, like everywhere. Society speaks both languages. So there are many terms, many lexical items that are either the same or have been adopted from Spanish. Now, also from another point of view, to see that there are differences, there are many differences in words, obviously. And some of them are even closer to Italian or French. So for instance, in Spanish, to say to speak, you say hablar. Now, in Catalan, you would say parlar. So if you know French, you would say that's very close to parler. So, but then there's also other differences in Catalan with the different dialects. From my dialect, in my island of Majorca, instead of saying parlar, we'll say xerrar. And what gets crazier is that if you take a ferry 2 hours out to the next island, they don't say xerrar, they say raya. That's just one example.
Could you give us another example of how different the words can be?
Many, okay. In Catalan alone, Balearic Catalan being those islands, so you have many differences. To say like a kid like in the masculine and feminine. You would say something like in Barcelona, or they would say noi, noia. That would be in Catalan. In Valencia, they would probably say xiquet, xiqueta. Okay. In Majorca, where I come, we say a lot, a lotta. See that geminate L I'm doing? A lot. And then in Ibiza, another island, they say bosh bosha. So you see nothing in common. Totally different words.
Those are some really interesting differences. Well, thank you so much, Mark. We've learned a lot.
No problem. Thank you.